Oh, thank you. Well, I'm Michael Bloom. I'm the president of the International Society of Guatemala Collectors, and also I'm a director of the American Philatelic Society, the largest stamp collecting organization in the world. The Guatemala Society has about 165 members, and if you're interested in the stamps of Guatemala, I hope that you'll join the society at the end of the presentation. The essays and proofs of Guatemala is actually a fairly extensive area. What started off as a brief presentation now has 5 different parts. The presentation is based on an exhibit on the essays and proofs of Guatemala that's been well received in the United States so far. It's won a few large gold medals. It won the AAPE award for creativity in exhibiting, and also won the APS Research Award. So we're going to begin, and this presentation is in chronological order. This part that we're going to go over today covers the years 1868 to 1895. So first of all, some of this may be elementary for our experts here, but let's talk a little bit about essays and proofs in general first. So we end up with an issued stamp, but there's a process of invention and creativity that results in the issued stamp. It often begins with an artist's sketches and essays. Then there are die proofs, plate proofs, and finally the issued stamps. There's a little bit of an exception in the material we're going to go over, in that some of the stamps that were printed by Waterlow and Sons Limited in England, they were used as samples to sell the printing that Waterlow does. And the Waterlow actually created some salesman samples that were carried in large books. When we talk about rarity, what you're going to see in today's presentation and others is a lot of archival material, some of which is unique and no one practically has seen before. Some of it is less common. The issued stamps, for the most part, are relatively common. The artist sketches and essays are the rarest because they're pretty much unique. There's only one of them. They're the original artwork from the artists. The die proofs are usually fairly rare. They're made in quantities of less than 10. And the plate proofs are issued usually no more than several sheets, quantities typically 200, 50 to 200, let's say. And with the color trial die and plate proofs, those salesman samples, as it were, they're usually several to tens of sheets, usually small sheets that were printed. The earliest that we go back to are the so-called bogus issues. Guatemala didn't really issue stamps until about 1871, but in 1867, a stamp was printed that hit the market and appeared in philatelic shops in Europe and the United States. These were pretty nicely done. They were engraved, perforated in some cases, and the Holland Printing Company presented these to Guatemalan postal authorities that were considering issuing their stamps. However, there's no evidence to support the view that these were ever issued as stamps. They're listed here only because they're the earliest emissions that we can discuss. So here's an example of the engraved bogus issues, and they come in several types. Type 1 has no outer frame line in the imperforate stamps. We have some that are perforated 11.75 without an outer frame line. That's type 1. Type 2 is just like type 1, except it does have an outer frame line and it's imperforate. By the way, these examples I've given you, the best reference book for Guatemala is a book that was printed about 60 years ago called Guatemala 1, followed by Guatemala 2, and the book that we sometimes refer to as Guatemala 3. These books were printed by the International Society of Guatemala Collectors, and the editor was a Mr. Goodman. And these stamps have been the Bible of Guatemala philately for a very, very long time. I might add at this stage that the Society is working on a new set of handbooks. I've heard some wonderful things about the new set of Honduras handbooks that your society and others have put together. We're doing this in a few phases. The first phase will be to reissue the reprints, what I would call the enhanced reprints of those old books. Then eventually we're going to crowdsource and produce a set of handbooks with a lot of new material gathered from many, many different sources. That's a multi-year project. So if you want to look for some of these essays and proofs, the best place to start is G1, G2, and G3. Okay, there's a type 2 of these bogus issues, which has an outer frame line and is perfed 11.75. They come in some lovely colors. And then these were so desirable, these bogus stamps, that they started to be faked and forged and imitated. So these stamps were done by lithography, not by engraving, and on pretty flimsy paper with counterfeit cancels. Spiro was one of the forgers who worked on these. They come imperforate or with rough pin perforations, kind of like what we would call sewing machine perforations. These are fun to collect, but again, they're not recognized issuances at all. Here we see some more lithographed imitations, this time perforated, and also some versions with and without white spaces in the upper tablet. Now we get to the so-called real stamps of Guatemala. The first issue was 1871. These stamps were typographed and printed in France by Hotel de Monet, based on a sketch from Guatemalan officials. The engraver was Ferdinand Joubert. And here you see the 5 stamps that came to issue. There's a variety of the 10 cent, in which the 0 of the 10 is wider. Now, what you're going to see in the rest of this presentation and other presentations is that there's a general order of how we show material. We always begin with the issued stamps. Then we go to any original artist's work, then to dye proofs, then to plate proofs, and if they exist, those salesman's proofs as well. So you'll find that order pretty much throughout. So there's a remarkable proof sheet of the 3 higher values. This is a copy of the sheet. I don't know if this sheet still exists or not, but it actually shows the 3 higher values, the 5, 10, and 20 centavos, and it shows them in different positions and slightly different designs. You'll notice there's an actual stamp in brown from the upper right-hand corner. This is what the sheet, the items in the sheet look like. This is a die proof from the 4th column, 1st row, and there are no numerals in the corners. And it indicates that there might have been a figure of value that was deleted. But I would love to know if this sheet still exists. In the process of creating the new handbooks, we're going to ask all of our members if they know of a color copy of this, or if anyone still has this sheet. I hope it hasn't been broken up. There were a lot of trial printings and printers' wastes in this issue, and there's some question whether or not these imperforates were really trial printings or whether they're plate proofs or if they're simply imperforate. And I've heard arguments back and forth on this issue. So here we see that the 1 centavo, 5, 20, and so forth. And we see a large sheet fragment of 50 of the 1 centavo. There is a little bit of a color difference. This 10 centavo in the lower left is a more of an ultramarine shade. So there's reason to believe that this was a trial printing perhaps, or a color trial plate proof. The argument is not over yet. Next, we come to the Liberty Head issue of 1875. And the plates, the actual printing plates for this were sold in 1875 after the Colombian Banknote Company closed up completely. And the Guatemalan government wanted these plates to be destroyed. They wanted them wrapped up and sealed and delivered to the Guatemalan legation in Washington or to the American Banknote Company in New York for safekeeping. But that didn't happen. The Guatemalans said that the plates were their property, and they insisted they had been owned by Guatemala and merely left with the Colombian Banknote Company as a convenience. Olmsted asked for $500 for taking care of them for so many years, and plus a reimbursement for storage. Finally, the plates were delivered to the American Banknote Company, and that we don't know if Olmsted got any money for it. So we see the issued stamps, all 4 of them. We see plate proofs. These are imperforate plate proofs. And there's not much archival material on the Liberty Head issue. I might add that this presentation really consists of stamps that I own. So in some cases, we might know of some other proofs and essays that aren't in the presentation. However, the new handbooks will be as complete as possible, will contain all known essays, proofs, and so forth. The Indian Woman issue of 1878, there's actually quite a bit of archival material available for this. Some of which I've discovered relatively recently. On the right, of course, up above are the issued stamps. The essay on the right has the values left out. The color is in emerald, although it's also available in a black. And they've removed some surrounding irregularly inked areas that you'll see soon. This is what they look like with those irregular inked areas. On the left, we see black with no values on coarse white paper, surrounded by those irregular inked areas. And on the right, it's a very dark slate green. It almost looks grayish black, but it's a slate green. And another example where they do have the tablet of values. Now this is another die proof. This was on soft porous paper, a wove paper in slate green. They also issued some black plate proofs. These were imperforate on India paper. And on the bottom, it's not a plate proof. This is a reproduction made by the original dies, the original cliches, on a heavier stock. In the, it's not shown here, but I think one of the interesting things about the Indian Head issue is that there's an essay that appears in Guatemala 1 that shows a different Indian woman completely. And they chose a different woman for these other essays and proofs. The plate layout was pretty strange, as you can see. This is imperf and on thin paper. They tried some interesting alternative papers on the Indian woman issues. These are on a thick, almost a cardboard paper. They look very much like the issued stamps. Then they did an experiment with a moire paper. With moire paper, the lines are printed first before the images. And the idea is that this would prevent counterfeiting because it would be difficult to reproduce the moire paper by counterfeiters. These, both these sets of plate proofs are very scarce. They're very, very hard to find. Most Guatemala collectors haven't really seen them. I blew up the 2 real value so you could see the details of the moire pattern. Then we get to the small Quetzal issues of 1879. These are considered some of the most beautiful stamps of Guatemala and maybe of the world. They have a very good reputation. These stamps were printed before Guatemala joined the UPU. So, and these are denominated in reals, 1/4 real and 1 real. Very, very attractive. You know, the Quetzal is a symbol of independence. The Quetzal is said to be one of the birds that does not breed in captivity. So it's a symbol of freedom. So this is a Quetzal on a pedestal. We have some sunken dye proofs of this on India paper. On the left is a partial dye proof with only the frame showing. It's the 1/4 real value. And you can clearly see American Banknote Company, New York. On the right is a complete die proof with the vignette. But here, the vignette is not actually printed, it's pasted in, literally. Someone printed the vignette separately, cut it out, and pasted it into the center of the frame to produce this die proof. And here's some more interesting sunken die proofs, this time of the 1 real value with an American banknote company underneath. But there is there's a handwritten note that says Muestra Primera, first proof. So this is the earliest version of this die proof, and it's in dark brown. On the right, we have a slightly different shade. It's in reddish brown, and it's also a complete design. Here's the 1 real in bicolor, again, with a complete design. And finally, we have some plate proofs on a cardstock. These are identical to the issued stamps, except they're imperforate and on cardstock. So we move forward to 1881. Guatemala has joined the UPU. They've changed their currency from reals to centavos. And here we see the issued stamps, the 5 values. And of course, these are very well known for having inverts of the 2 centavo, the 5 centavo, and the 20 centavo, with the invert of the 5 centavo being the rarest of them. The 1 centavo actually does appear as an invert, but only in the plate proofs. It was never issued as a stamp or ever used as a stamp. And as we may know, the 2 centavo was also counterfeited by Spiro. So if we look at the first essays, we see one all in black of the 5 centavo, similar to the issue design, but the shading is different. And the lower left of the pedestal is lighter, and the short vertical lines of the center of the frame are omitted. So this is an essay because it's not exactly as issued. Another essay is just of the frame itself, similar to the design that was issued, but instead of saying Union Postal Universal Guatemala, it simply says Correos de Guatemala. So I wonder, maybe this essay was issued before the decision to join the UPU, but it is valued in centavos. We have sunken dye proofs of the frame only on Indian paper. This is a complete set of the sunken proofs. Remember, I told you the 1 penny, 1 centavo black does appear as an invert, but only as a plate proof. So this is a plate proof of the 1 centavo with inverted center. We also have a large number of plate proofs of just the center vignette. And the plate number is 5, which is inverted and mirrored. Here are some more plate proofs of just the frame only, but these are all in the color of the issued stamp. And now we have plate proofs of the complete design. The 1 centavo, 2, some large multiple of the 2, the 5, and a large multiple of the 10. These are all part, by the way, of a separate exhibit. I did an exhibit on the small UPU Quetzals. It was my very, very first exhibit. And it was what was interesting about exhibiting that was the exhibit won 2 awards in one night. It won the Novice Exhibitor Award, and it won large gold, all as my first exhibit. So I was very happy and very proud of that. Now we get to the large Quetzal lithographed issue of 1886 from the American Banknote Company. We think we know the designer, Emilio de Leon, probably. We don't know who did the original engraving. There's very little archival material of this lithographed set. There's only one lithographic stone proof and no plate proofs, of course, since the stamps are made using lithography. But they did issue some souvenir cards that almost serve as proofs. I should probably put the word proofs. I'm going to do that. I'm going to make a change as we're talking. Can I do that? No, I'm in the middle of the exhibit. I can't. But I would put the word proofs in quotations because the government created a set of 3 souvenir cards, and the second and third bearing the inscription of the American Banknote Company. It was used as a New Year's greeting by postal officials. Supposedly, only 3 sets of these cards have survived. So this is one of those 3 sets. And the design on the cover card at top is a Quetzal perched on a calendar with a leaf turned to 1894 in color, and then a Happy New Year greeting from the Director General and employees of the Postal Service. Here we see the other 2 cards. The card on left in black and white are the 17 postal officials and their signature. In the center is Mr. Ubico, the Director General de Correos of Guatemala, 1893. On the other side, with touches of color, are a street scene, telephone wires, and a railroad train and ships. But the best part of this set is this. These are reproductions of the original lithographed stamps on a really thick card. And unfortunately, one reason so few cards exist is that collectors cut them apart to make them look like plate proofs. So they damaged these and destroyed them. So on the right, what look like plate proofs are not. What they are is the card on the left cut up to produce what look like plate proofs. That's kind of regretful. So in the picture on the left, you see the complete set, original size reproductions. You see a 10 centavos stamped envelope, and you see a 2-cent wrapper and 4 3-cent postcards. The postcards, of course, are the exhibition issue of 1897. So now in 1893, they decided to go ahead and engrave these instead. No one's quite sure why they made the change, but they had to engrave these, and they're very, very similar to the lithographed stamps. In fact, collectors have a lot of trouble differentiating between the 1 centavo value that's lithographed and the 1 centavo value that's engraved. This slide shows all the variations of the issued stamps, particularly the 2 centavos. One variety has a short foot on the 2, and the other is a different shade. And again, the 10 centavo different shades, the 1 centavo different shades. But because these are engraved, we do have a fair amount of archival material. Here, for example, are Sunken Dye Proofs, and we see the 1 centavo, this time it's in black, remember it was issued in blue, the 10 centavo, which is about the right color, and the 20 centavo, which is close to the right color. Now, what I'd like you to notice is that each of these has a plate number issued by the American Banknote Company. But if you look at the right, the 20 centavo stamp, originally the plate number was C300. But the American Banknote Company at one point in time decided to renumber a lot of the plate numbers. So what they did was, by hand, they crossed out the C300 and they wrote in by hand the new plate number 26187. And this happens not just for Guatemala. It happens with pretty much all the Central and South American countries that had plate proofs issued by the American Banknote Company. We have an interesting sunken die proof with 2 designs as part of the same proof. Now, the American Banknote Company had a file cabinet filled with these plate proofs. And what they did is they took the plate proof and they cemented it, they glued it to the card. And the card was in a big filing cabinet. These are cards called index copies that came from the filing cabinet. And we see them for the same stamps we just saw as plate proofs. Now we see them mounted on these index cards. At the bottom, we also see some unmounted plate proofs. Now, these aren't die proofs. These are plate proofs that appeared in multiples and were cut apart. In 1895, a new value was issued, the 6 centavo. So again, what we see here is a die proof, a plate proof that's unmounted, and then we see essentially the same plate proof on one of those index copies. And that is the end of part 1.
Thank you, Michael. Great presentation and outstanding material.
Thank you. This is part 1 of 5. They're all of similar length, and the next ones have a lot more of the artist's own sketches and drawings. Okay, so my understanding is we go to a Q&A session, Henry?
Yes, at this point, if there are any questions, algunas preguntas por ahí, si levantan la mano o nos comunican. While we're waiting, I have a question about the first issue, the one that the unofficial. Very, very well done, very nice traces and everything. Do we know the whole history of them in there? Because that seems like a big plan.
Yeah, we really don't. We really don't. I've summarized the information that appears in the G1 book, and I've done searches through our general El Quetzal, and we just don't know much. There are no archives that anyone's found.
No one has speculated even a theory where they may come from, or by similarities with other printers.
We think let me go back to it. We think we know who the printer was. Let me just get out of here for a second and go back. Okay, we think it was the Holland Printing Company of Boston.
Okay.
But that's really all we know. We don't know who is behind it, why they decided to do this. These are not easy to find, especially the engraved ones. The fakes are somewhat easier, but they're not easy.
Yeah, that's what I thought they would have been easier because, you know, they put a lot of upfront money just to produce that. That is not an improvisation. That is very well done.
Yes.
So that was that's kind of the curiosity that.
I'm equally curious if anyone in this society knows why. I would love to know, and I'll publish it.
So that's one of those mysteries. There are a couple of hands raised over there. Alfonso.
Michael, thank you so much for your conference. It was very nice and interactive. One question about the fakes. I saw you show only singles. It's known.
I have never seen a single multiple of the bogus fur series or the counterfeits. In all time I've been collecting, I've never seen a multiple.
Wow.
Has anyone here seen a multiple?
Maybe not.
No, I don't think so. So we don't even really know the like in the engraved, we don't even know the plate layout. Is it plate? We don't know if it's plateable. It probably isn't because we don't have multiples.
Maybe the printers separate all in single ones to sell.
Maybe they only printed one at a time.
That could be.
I don't know. Maybe they just printed from the original die. But we do know that it must have been more complicated than that because they issued multiple dies. There are varieties.
Okay.
Jaime.
Yes, excellent talk, Michael. Congratulations.
Thank you, Jaime.
My question is regarding precisely the same issue we're talking about, the bogus one. Especially, I'm not familiar with it at all. This is probably the first time I've seen it. But what seems curious to me is that why Guatemala and why run into that expense to produce a bogus stamp? I think there must be more behind it, and my question is in regards to whether we know more about this printing company and if this printing company do the same for other countries, or this issue of postage stamps was unique for Guatemala.
It's a really interesting question. You know, we live in the internet age, so I'm going to just do real quick Holland Printing Company of Boston and see what comes up.
It never became part of American banknote.
Let's see what it says. It's not even coming up. Holland Printing Company, Chicago. It's not even coming up in Google, not an initial Google search.
Are you sure it's in Boston?
That's the information I got from G1. Yeah. I know they did have Scott catalog listing at one time. It was delisted.
Well, but take it with a how you say
grain of salt.
With a grain of salt. The fact that it was located in Boston, because if Google can find it,
yeah,
I would question the origin. That book, Guatemala #1, is a great book, but it cannot be taken as fact. Everything.
Right. No. But actually, just for your information and for the groups, the G1 took about 12 years of research with about 40 researchers to put that together. It was tremendous effort that took them back to the archives.
60 years ago, they didn't have Google. And what seems peculiar to me is that a printing company, which was able back then to do such an elaborate work as this, doesn't come out when you Google it.
It is strange. I'm trying it a little different Google search to see if it comes up. Let's see. That's funny. Unshed in the Netherlands came up on that Google search. Why is that? Let me just see if there's any connection there. And
did CIVIC had any connection anywhere nearby?
yeah, I'm looking.
Because it seems strange to me that a company that has no experience at all producing postage stamps would go into the trouble of trying to get a country to buy their work. Someone had to be involved somehow.
Yeah, I will look into it further. I don't have an answer for you, but I think I'd love to know the answer.
Yeah, I'm going to look for it too.
Yeah, please, anyone who, let me know. It's great that we all collect different aspects of Central and South America. So we get answers from someone who collects, let's say, Honduras, that applies to Guatemala and so forth.
Now these had nothing to do with Hamilton, right?
Hamilton printing, no.
Okay, we can rule that out.
I think so.
Okay.
Let's not spend too much more time on this because we just don't have the answers.
Well,
any further questions?
I don't see any other, but while we are waiting, the subsequent issues, they have the typical proofs, the sunken dye, the plate proof, and all that. And one of the things that is circulating, at least in the country I collect in Peru, is pretty easy to determine what I call a post-production proof, those that were renumbered, versus the pre-production proof. So for me, there are two separate things. But in the index cards, it seems that everything that went affixed to the index cards, they were all the post-production type of proofs.
I wouldn't.
Right? So,
I would not assume that.
okay.
The renumbering took place later.
Yeah, 1924, I guess, or something like that.
Yeah. There was an article, I think, from the Oficina.
Ross Stoll wrote the article, and he had actually a presentation here.
Right. So yes, I know about that, but doesn't mean that the proofs were produced after the stamps were printed. It just means that the numbers were changed later.
Okay.
Now the only post-printing proofs that I am going to show you are the ones that are the salesman samples.
Yes.
They did some really interesting things. They did stamps that were engraved and produced lithographed copies of them. They changed the colors. They had mini sheets. That was all post-production, yes.
Okay, great. Heinz.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Bloom, for your interesting presentation. Really interesting. I don't knew before something about Guatemala specifically. I want to say something about just American banknote company production. You mentioned recently that Rostol gave a presentation here. So it seems obviously that proofs which have only one number to say C300. That is the original printing.
Mm-hmm.
And some of them were kept on the archive of American Banknote Company. So in 1924, they decided to make a renumbering for all the dies. So this C300 became the number 25, and so this means that this copy with the 25 and so is a new copy, obviously, because it has the strike and the new number. But other copies may have been kept so and used for the index copy.
Well, I may be wrong in how I remember it, but I believe in Charles' article, I thought he basically said that this was more of a bookkeeping change. Henry, do you remember that? I thought it was more of a bookkeeping change,
Yes.
not so much printing from original dies, making other proofs. Maybe
Yes.
someone else can comment on that.
Yeah, I recall something similar to what you described, Michael, that there was just for internal accounting purposes, and especially because they needed to reconcile the merge that they did with other companies, and in some cases the numbering kind of overlapped. They needed to have like a single reference. The year that is stuck in my mind is also 1924, because if I remember correctly, and I will have to look for the reference, is when I don't recall the exact statement being used, but my recollection is that they were all printed again, which is kind of challenging because of, calling out the different plates and using the same ink. So maybe that's one thing that will require clarification. I don't remember exactly that event and how they came to light in that sense.
I think I believe the original plate was yes, with a new number. So I have some Chilean consular proofs, die proofs, with the old number and the new, but in black. So originally, in the origin, 1905 or 7, they haven't been printed in black. So it has been printed in 1924.
At some other time.
But the dies who are affixed to the copy card, they are in original color and with the original C, to say 300. So they have, they must be the original printing kept and on the archive. That's what I think.
Okay.
You may be right.
A little other comment. You mentioned in this 1881 series,
small Quetzal,
with the inverted 5. You mentioned an inverted 5 for a plate number. May it be a 2?
Oh, I know what you're
2?
saying. Oh, yeah. When we looked at the vignettes, I think you're referring to the Quetzal vignettes. Were you talking about? Are you sure you're talking about the 5, or was it just the center vignette?
No. You mentioned at the border, it has a 2, a 5.
No, that was not the 5 cent. That was just the center vignette. It actually looks more like a 2 than a 5. I think it might be a 2.
Yes. Yes, yeah. I think so.
I thought so too when I looked at it this time.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
Any other questions for Michael? I'm going to share my screen because I have found this. Okay. And let me know if you see it. What we have here is, this is a die proof of one of the printing they did for the postal stationery with the original number, and this is the number they renamed, but it's handwritten and to Heinz point. In this particular case, because it's handwritten, this could be, or very likely is, a proof from the pre-production time, or the time that this particular vignette was made. But there are others that have actually the strike here with the line and the numbers separately. So they could be combined all together. After 1924, I don't recall I cannot make the association, but the 1924 strikes in my head many times because it was mentioned in the article by Ross and in other places as well. So that seems to be like the moment everything was made.
Henry, mira lo que te envié.
Okay.
Es de esto. Esto lo encontré en Google.
Okay. Do you want to share your screen? Alfonso.
Sí, sí, voy.
Okay.
Michael, did you saw this history?
No, I've never seen this before.
It's an explanation of what happened with August.
Interesting. Can you send this to me?
Yes.
Yeah, send this to me. I'll include it in our new handbooks. Yeah, I've never heard this story.
Nothing is undercovered in my oficina.
Okay, I hope it's true.
Yeah, that's the other piece. It needs to be validated. It could be just a speculation.
Well, that's one of those things we could say, apocryphally, or something along those lines. It has not been confirmed, but here's a story that's been told. Let's see, Holland Company, yeah. Interesting.
Alberto de Barrio. Maybe that's also another name to Google. If something else might pop up.
Yeah. S. Allen Taylor. Okay, well, this provides more information. Perhaps do some more research.
Yep.
Yeah, good. Excellent.
Good stuff. Okay, another hand out there. Mauricio.
Good evening, Michael. First, thank you for the presentation, and I'm looking forward to see the other 4 parts. Two questions. One, I see that you are in Oregon. What made you collect Guatemala?
Oh.
And two, at the beginning of your presentation, you mentioned that, well, I collect Honduras, and you mentioned that some of the handbooks of Honduras, if I understood correctly, are going to be re-edited. Can you give me a little more insight about that? Because if that's happening, we'll be really happy to see that down here.
Okay, I think let me take the second first. Isn't Gallegos working on Honduras?
El Salvador.
Oh, I'm sorry, El Salvador. Oh, my confusion, El Salvador. Okay. That's okay. And to answer your first question, I've been collecting stamps my entire life, and sometimes I look for a new area to collect. And as I get more advanced in my own collecting, one of the things I look for first is the quality of the research and literature for country. And the Guatemala Society did a great job of those handbooks, and other Central and South American countries, the handbooks weren't as good. And El Quetzal, which has been published for 50 years, is a great publication. So that was part of it. The other part was the organization itself. It's nice to belong to a society that's very social, as well as very focused on the hobby. So I started collecting Guatemala. I then ended up joining the board of the ISGC, and I used to go to board meetings, and I'd realized the meetings would happen once a year, and people had wonderful ideas, but they never went to fruition. They'd always die. So I decided that I was asked to become president, I decided that the organization should meet every month, the board. And since then, we've grown in size by more than 50%. And it's a very healthy organization now. It wasn't so healthy before. And also because of COVID, we started the Guatemala Stamp Chats, and that's bringing new members to us as well. So that may be more than you asked, Mauricio.
Thanks. Yeah, and once again, I'm looking forward to the other 4 parts.
Yeah, I like the other 4 parts much better in some ways because you really get to see things that you haven't seen before. Stamps that never got issued, but had some beautiful artwork behind the essays, that sort of thing.
Okay, thanks.
That will be
And-
great, looking into all those pieces. Any
And
other
the
questions?
new one more thing, the new handbooks that we're working on eventually, I think it's going to have a separate volume devoted to Guatemala essays, proofs, and specimens. There's enough material. The presentation, all 5 parts, have about 200 slides already, and it's still growing. We're always discovering new archival material.
In reference to that, when the American banknote archives went to the public and they started to show up all over, every single auction house out there, did you find a lot of new material? Did you any additional information where I'm looking for if there was an aha moment that maybe corrected something you already thought was in a different way?
I started collecting after that sale, so I
Okay.
wasn't able to take advantage of it. But here's a book that was just given to me by our friend Nick in the UK. I'm sorry, it doesn't show up really well. I have the
Latin America.
blurry focus on, but it's basically, it's Latin American color trials and sample stamps. It's all those, Waterloo salesman's proofs for all Latin America in one book. Nick Salter gave that to me recently.
Okay.
But it's amazing. I'm doing these handbooks, and I'm also going through auction catalogs for the last 20, 30 years, and a lot of material shows up. I think there's a large point to be made here, and that point is that for the hobby to be healthy, and for our specialty societies to succeed, we need to redo our handbooks in general. They're old, they're black and white, they're hard to read, they're not updated, they're not electronically stored, and there's no way to keep them as a living document.
Yeah.
So what I'm developing, and I could perhaps do this as a presentation to Mi Oficina, is a template for how to bring handbooks up to date. Everything including scanning, optical character recognition, editing, crowdsourcing. So for example, if you have a handbook on Peru and you have a Peru organization with 30 members, let's say, you can capture everything electronically, chapter by chapter, then go out to your 30 members or more and say, here's what's missing. All our photos are black and white. Do you have color scans? Do you have essays and proofs? Do you have interesting uses on cover? Do you have ambulantes or what have you? And you can really start to grow the organization, grow the interest in your particular geographic area. It's really, I think it's a really amazing step to take. It's a huge amount of work, but I'm doing that right now. As a matter of fact, I'm sorry I have this fuzz on, but I'm capturing every page of our handbooks, and I have a group of proofreaders who are going through my work now. And eventually you're going to see some lovely, easy to read materials. I mean, I look at the old handbooks, sometimes they don't even put the illustrations near the right text.
Yeah.
They're really pretty awful, some of them, but they have a great deal of research and information that you don't want to lose.
Yeah. No, and you bring up a very good point. And actually, I take you up on your offer because that methodology and make it standard is critical. Otherwise, you're absolutely right. One issue may be well covered. The other one is just touching the surface. So there is no correlation other than the anecdote. So it needs to go beyond that. Yeah.
Yes. And I've produced a PowerPoint that I can show here. It's really designed for the APS for their stamp chats, the APS stamp chats, and also to do as presentations at major stamp conferences on this subject.
Looking forward to attend one of those. A couple of other hands out there. Mauricio.
Yeah, Michael, I was just recalling something that you mentioned on a proof of Guatemala that didn't have the UPU initials. And you said that it most likely was made prior to Guatemala's incorporation to the UPU, but I was also checking Honduran stamps well after Honduras entered UPU, and they don't say UPU. Actually, the UPU initials appear in Honduras in Honduran stamps maybe about a decade and a half later after Honduras joined the UPU. So maybe those Guatemala stamps were actually those trials. Those proofs were made when Guatemala was in UPU, but they simply didn't engrave those initials there. If you compare them with the Honduran stamps of the same time period.
That's a real possibility. I don't know what their motives were, but they made a decision afterwards, and this is right when they joined the UPU. I think it was the same year.
Yeah.
So there wasn't much time between the proof without UPU and the proofs with UPU.
Yeah.
Yeah, but in checking Honduras, several years passed in the Honduran case before several years passed, and then the UPU initials appeared on the engravings of the stamps. So
right,
it could be the same for Guatemala.
This is, by the way, this is terrific. I'm hearing a perspective that involves you folks with different interests in Central and South America, able to provide information that I couldn't have gotten through just speaking to people who collect Guatemala. So I thank you.
Yeah, those are the benefits of the pandemic and having us in Zoom every day. So,
that's true,
in the
Mauricio.
Oficina, yeah.
Yes.
And this group is very well represented. You have at least now people from 15 different countries over here, all collecting different things.
Yeah.
So Jorge, there is another question there.
Thank you, Michael. I was a little bit late. I didn't catch exactly what you mean by a handbook. Could you?
Oh, sure,
explain that?
sure. Yes. About 50 years ago, the Guatemala Society issued its first handbook. It's a book that covered Guatemala stamps from 1870 to about 1902. About 2 or 3 years later, they issued another volume in the same format, covering 1902 to 1970. And then a third volume, which isn't well coordinated with the first two, 1970 to about 1990 or so. So that's what I mean by handbooks. And they're really old. They've been out of print for 40, 50 years. You can find them on eBay. They're still around, and people will spend $70 US, $80 US for an old copy.
Okay, but that handbook includes stamps, or it includes how to collect the topic, or what?
Okay, so the handbooks contain the following. They contain the stamps, postal stationery, on the classics, the known covers, ambulantes, postmarks, post offices. That's pretty much what they contain. My long-term view is to separate those out into separate volumes, because in just trying to reproduce the handbooks in readable form, I'm afraid I'm going to end up with nearly 1,000-page book.
Okay, yeah. But you mentioned something to do this electronically. What was the idea?
So the project has 2 phases. In the first phase, we scan everything with a special book scanner. We use optical character recognition to create a text file. We input that text file to a publishing program like Microsoft Publisher. We do a lot of editing. We add a lot of scans, but in black and white to be consistent. And some juggling of the text and new fonts, larger format. And that's the end of phase 1. And then we publish. So now we have a book to sell that will keep us going for a couple of years. After that, we begin phase 2. In phase 2, we take, let's say, the chapter on the first stamps of Guatemala, a set of 5 shield stamps, right? And we take all the work we've put into it, and we send it out to our complete membership. And we ask them, we say, look, please look at this chapter. If you have material that should be in the chapter that's missing, send it to us. So now what do we have? We have the ability to freeze at some point and publish in print. a series of handbooks, and now we're going to separate it out. So one big book, stamps, one book, postmarks, one book, revenues, right? So I have a series of handbooks, and we can make a decision whether to publish electronically, whether to give people access to that material on our website or somewhere else in some library, some large philatelic library.
How do you financial all that? With the printing stuff, or?
Okay, let me answer that. In phase one, which is producing what I call enhanced reprints, I personally am doing all of the capture and mostly editing and scanning.
Wow.
Every day I spend a few hours with it. We're actually going to have it printed in China.
Okay.
We have some very good low-cost printing in China, and I'm in the Chinese manufacturing business. So we're gonna save on printing costs, not printing costs, but shipping costs, by throwing cartons of books in with our steel parts.
Okay.
And we're going to have to invest in so many copies. But now you can print 50 copies. So before we print, we go out to our membership and pre-sell the copies. So there's no financial risk really to the organization.
Okay.
So that's how we're doing it. We're being very careful financially. As president, I want to make sure we don't become insolvent. So I watch the treasury as well.
That's interesting.
But we went out, the society went out and bought a book scanner. It'd be very hard to do without a book scanner because it's so automated. You literally flip the pages. Every time you flip the page, it copies 2 pages. And when you open up a book, it's curved, the book. This scanner scans a laser line across the book, compensates for the curve, and then provides a scan, and then provides the optical character recognition software.
Good. Thank you.
Did you buy that Caesar type of?
Yes, it's from Caesar.
Yeah, we use those too. Yep.
Yeah, I use it constantly now.
The software makes the whole difference.
Yes.
It is.
It's relatively inexpensive for what it does. We have the top of the line, which is less than
the one with the
$1,000.
pedal and the whole thing.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's the one we got. Good. I will chat with you separately because the methodology you guys are applying to do that and being so cooperative is very important and probably can be, take as an inspiration for other countries like that they don't have like a encyclopedia or one of those handbooks, but we do have in the case of Peru, we have a lot of literature. Some of that has been copyrighted we were able to work with the authors who authorized us to digitalize them. In some other cases, we don't,
That's an issue, but again, we have a journal and we own the copyright to the journal.
That's right.
Right, so we have that. I don't think it's going to be an issue. Actually, an issue for us, and it's going to be an issue for everyone, is if you print catalogs of your own, handbooks, catalogs, can you use Scott numbers? Now, the general answer is no, because Scott owns the copyright to the catalog numbers, and you can get special permission. We got special permission 50 years ago when we printed these. So our canned books have Scott, Evert, Michel, Minkus.
Wow.
And
that shows the age.
Yeah, I know. And I don't know if we can get permission again. We might have to just go. We have our own catalog numbering system anyway.
Maybe good time for doing the conversion and just standardize everything under your control.
Yeah, well, that's what we've done in the past. But we have at the end of every listing of, let's say, a set of stamps, we have a little line that has all the catalog equivalents.
Sure.
I don't know if we'll be able to do that legally.
Yeah. Well, worth to ask, and good luck.
Well, we have good relationships with Scott's catalog because we help them to keep up with the new issues of Guatemala.
Yeah.
And we're advertisers too, so we give them some money.
I hope they don't say no. They will. They may they will be cooperative because it's a reciprocity, right? It's also in
Yeah.
a way making a reference, perpetuating that number.
Well, it's not going to stop us from publishing, but we won't use their numbers if they say no.
That's right. Exactly. Any final question or comment out there?
I just want to say I would love to promote Latin American philately in general. You know, I'm a promoter of the hobby in general with the American Philatelic Society. And I'm also on what's called the Campaign for Philately Committee. It's the fundraising arm of the APS. And at times I've been in charge of the educational programs as a committee.
Yeah, and thank you for doing that because it's a lot of work. You just mentioned the few hours a day scanning, and I know that's heavy labor.
It is. I can't do more than 1 or 2 hours at a time before I go nuts.
Yeah. All right.
Well,
Michael.
I've enjoyed meeting all of you. We have a next session scheduled, I know. I'm assuming we'll schedule the rest down the line.
That's right. Actually, the part 2 is in December. It is on Saturday, December the 18th. That's when we have part 2. And I have already scheduled the other parts. We announce those as they come. And I believe I send you the schedule, how they come from. So with that,
good.
Michael, thanks again. It has very well done. Great presentation.
Okay.
Looking
Thank you,
forward
guys.
to the
It's been such a pleasure meeting you.
Same here. Y el día de mañana.